Okay, this is the part where we're going to model the Glock. The first step you want to do in modeling anything, unless it's something that you're inventing on the fly, like a sci-fi weapon or something like that, you always want to start with some kind of reference. Do your research. Basically, if it's going to be a Glock, we want it to look like a Glock. So what I did was I went online and just got a couple photos, and I'm going to use these as my reference just to get the major details. We're not going to end up with a 110% flawless, perfect representation of the Glock. It's going to be very, very, very close enough to the point where it's guaranteed to be, it's not going to be mistaken as another gun. It's definitely going to be a Glock. Now what we're going to do is we're going to model directly off of this reference here, because this is a nice side shot. It's going to give us our basic dimensions. I believe you may be able to find some actual blueprints of this weapon, which might be a little more effective in getting you exact details, and if you cared about perfect measurements and things like that, then you could use something like that. However, for the purposes here, I'm just going to make a basic Glock. So what we're going to do is, in Max, I'm going to start a new scene. Okay, I'm not going to save anything there, and let me go ahead and close that. File, new. Nope, I hit open on accident. I'm going to hit G to get my grid back up. And the first thing I want to do is I want to drop down a plane that I can use to map my reference picture onto. So I'm just going to make it 1 by 1, and I'm going to rotate, keeping a snap on here, angle snap toggle, so that I'm staying within 5 degrees. I'm going to bring it up 90 degrees. Now one of the things that you can do, well actually what you need to do, is if you right click on here and go to properties, which is below the capture window, but I'm just hitting properties, and you go to details in Windows, you can actually get the dimensions. This is 1194 by 794. So what we're going to do is we're going to match this size on the plane so that when we map our image to it, it's not distorted or stretched in any of the different dimensions. And one of the things to note is that you need to reverse this. This is actually the width and the height, which is kind of weird. So I'm going to make it 794 by 1194. Okay, so I'm just going to come here, edit my properties, and I'm going to go 794 by 1194, and zoom out. You can see that it's huge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide that by 10. So I'm going to do 79.4 and 119.4 to make it a little bit more of a manageable size. Now if I go and hit M and bring up my maps, I can always reset all of these maps. If you only see 6 here, you can go to options here, and you can tell it down here how many slots you want, and I always keep 6 by 4, so I have as many as possible. There's also a thing to cycle it. I believe if you just hit X here, it'll cycle. So keep it open. Gonna put maps here. You can drop down here to maps, and you can hit your diffuse, or you can shortcut to it right here. There is a box next to diffuse. You hit that, and it will take a second, and it will pop up and ask you what type of map. We're going to just go with a bitmap image. Okay, now, and don't know if I'm going to put this on E3D. Hopefully they'll accept it. If not, it just doesn't matter what I named it. And you can see you got your previews down here, and the one we want is this Gen 3 here, so hit open. Okay, and we want to check this box here that says show shaded material in viewport. That way it shows up on the model, and with the model selected we can say put material to scene, or sorry, assign material to selection, and you can see that it did show up. The other way to do it is to just drag the material to the object that you want to do. So now we have this reference plane here, and it's at 0, 0. Actually it's not. Again, I can right click, and right-click my spinners to zero them out. I'm just going to move it back in the Y so I can work at the origin here. And what I want to do is I don't want to keep accidentally selecting this and possibly moving it around and messing up everything there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click And if I say freeze selection right now, we're going to have a problem. It's going to go blank. And what you do there is you right click and you go to object properties here and you uncheck show frozen in gray. And now if I freeze selection, you can see that I can't pick it, I can't move it, I can't do anything to it, though it's still showing the texture on there. If I right click and say unfreeze all, I can now pick it and move it around. So I'm going to freeze selection. So what I'm going to do here is this bottom button down here is going to allow me to split my view into my 4 quadrants. If I hit it again, it's going to maximize whatever viewport I had selected. If you middle click, you can select the different viewports that you want to work in, and there's a hotkey for this is Alt W. Yeah, Alt W will bring you back and forth. So I'm just going to go ahead and work in the front view. If you hit V, it's actually going to bring up this list, and every little underlined key letter here is the next hotkey. So if we go back view, if I come here and I hit F3, it's going to go from wireframe to solid. F4 is going to go from wireframe over solid to not showing the wireframe. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to hit F3 and F4, and I'm going to turn this into shaded, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to maximize that view. And you can see we're in the back, so if you can click here and you can just say front. There's tons of ways to get to this, and I can just hit F, or I can hit P will get me back to perspective, and I can hit just F by itself, or you can hit V and pick if you want to see the different views. So we're going to go in this view here, and we're going to start by making a box, and we're just going to try to match the slide here. And I made my X and Y, but if I keep dragging, you can't see it because I'm looking straight down this view, but I also need to set my height here, and I'm just going to click anywhere. Now if I go back to perspective here, you can see that it's very thin. I'm basically going to make this pretty much a box. I'm going to try my best to keep these relatively even numbers in quarters, and I'm going to go the same depth as I did the height, because if I look at my reference pictures, it's roughly a square if you were to measure it. I don't personally have a Glock to actually do any measurements on. I don't have blueprints, so I'm doing this by eye, but it looks to me to be pretty much a perfect square. So the same height here, I'm doing the same depth. So we can go back here. I want to make sure that in the Y that I'm zeroed out, which I actually am. Okay, you can see, but it's also building off of the center point. So if I go to the right view, sorry I missed that, right view, oops, VR, you can see that my origin's here and it's building off. Now if I want to center this, I can come here to the hierarchy, affect my pivot, and say center to object. And now if I right click my Y, I can put it dead center so that it's right down the origin. It's going to make it easier for the aim animation. So I'm going to go back to the front view, and I'm going to make another box. Actually, I'm not. I'm just going to copy this. Hold Shift will copy stuff. We'll ask you, do you want it to be copy, instance, or reference? We're going to make this a copy. An instance will be basically a floating visual copy of the object. Anything that you do to any one of these will affect the other one as well. We want to make these completely separate, so we're just going to hit OK. I'm going to convert this to an editable polygon using my editable poly hotkey, and I am just going to move it into place. It is slightly separate from the top, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to match that height there. Okay. Now I'm just going to go back to perspective view, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start cutting in some of this detail, and I'm just going to select all of my edges going around. If I hit F3, you can see I just dragged a marquee across it, and there's a key here called connect, and that's going to split it right down all the middles of my objects. And if I go back to my front view, I'm going to move that roughly there, and then I'm going to split this one again, and I'm going to move it to roughly there. And now what I can do, so I go back to perspective, I can get this individual polygon, and I can use the extrude, and if I hit the box next to it, it gives me settings, and I can set how much I want to extrude it. I'm going to do it to about there. I'm going to hit OK, then I'm going to go back to my front view. I'm going to move it roughly into position. Okay, this is basic of a Lego gun as you can possibly get. Now if I want to start cutting out some of this stuff, it's pretty simple. I just cut across here with my edges. There's the hotkeys for getting to these different sub-select modes. 1, 2, 3 is border, 4 is polygon, 5 is element. An element is the entire connected object. Okay, I'm going by edges. I'm just going to hit connect again. Now if I move this up, you see I can potentially break what I'm doing here. So if I actually highlight constrain by edge and I move it up, you can see that it stays on the edge, and I want to keep that active for right now. It can actually mess you up, and I'm going to connect that again here, and I'm going to select this polygon on the front. Now I could go to perspective and grab it, but I can also drag a marquee here and then Alt to deselect this, and now this is all I have selected. So I'm going to go extrude, and I can drag this down to about there. Okay, just hit the checkbox. Hit 1 to get to my verts. And oops, I'm still on edge. See, could mess you up. I'm going to try to line these up. Okay, now if I wanted to, if I go to my perspective view, you can see that my X here, you can see it's kind of hard to tell, but if I have these two and I select it and I want to make sure that they're in line, there's a nice feature here for make planar in the X. Oops, I gotta have all this selected. If I go make planar in the X, you can see it flattens it out that way. If I do it in the Y, you can see it flattens it that way. If I do it in the Z, it does it that way. Now it does it based on the rotation of the entire object. If you want it to be world space, you actually need to collapse this so that its rotation is based on world space. And the way to do that is go up here to your utilities, which is the hammer, hit reset X form, reset selected. And it didn't look like it did anything, but it did. If you go back to your modifier stack, you can see X form is there. If I go and collapse to or convert back to editable poly, now if I do this in the Y, you'll see that it collapses that way because that's world space. I've reset the rotation to be back to world space. Okay, so we're just going to continue adding more detail. So I'm going to hit 4 to get my polygons, and I'm going to extrude that again. Just going to hit the checkbox, go back to my front view, VF, and I'm going to move that to roughly there. Just going to grab my verts here and kind of move those into the right position. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to start coming down from the top, so I'm just going to get my edges, drag across and connect it, move it about there, drag down to get those, connect it, move it about there. Now I want this polygon here, and I'm going to extrude that. Okay, just going to go to about there, hit OK. I'm going to use my scale tool, which is R. There's another couple hotkeys. Q, okay, I'm not going to touch it. Q, W is move, E is rotate, R. If you look on your keyboard, those are in line in the same method that they're in line here. These three buttons here are, these two are options for select, and this is select by name. If you bring that up, it shows you all the objects you have in your scene. Okay, so I'm going to just scale this down and then extrude again. Just hit the checkbox. I'm going to move it to about here, and then I'm going to extrude down one more time. Hit the checkbox. Now I'm going to hit 1 to get my verts, and I'm going to make these planar in the Z. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this in perspective viewport. Just going to grab this polygon and this polygon, and I hit bridge, and it connects them, which is a nice feature. Now if I didn't like this edge here, if I didn't want it, this one here, which would be F3 here to go into wireframe, if I wanted to get rid of that, I can select it. If I hit backspace and then I go hit 1 to get to my verts, you can see that left behind the verts here, and that's not good. So if I go back to 2 and if I hit control backspace, it actually gets rid of the verts as well, which is a nice feature. F3, get back into my solid view. Okay, VF, get back into my side view. I'm just going to move that forward a little bit, just so it's slightly curved. Okay, I'm going to take this guy, I'm going to move it up here. I'm going to bring this one, I'm going to go ahead and match that by edge. Another nice feature is Alt with an object selected, which is this box 02. I'm actually going to go ahead and name it real quick, call this grip, call this slide. Okay. If I select the grip and I hit Alt X, it actually turns it to see-through. I'm going to hit G to get rid of my grid. And you can see that I can actually see through the model. It's transparent now. And I can pick up what's going on in the back, which can be very helpful when you're going to actually try to line some of this stuff up. And with you can still pick off of it. It stays, transparent. I get Alt X on this one, do the same thing. Alt X again, we'll toggle it back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to keep it transparent. Hit 2, and get this edge, and I'm going to hit connect, and I can just move that. Oops, I'm still on edge. I do that a lot. Can move that like that. Okay, in my perspective view, you can see, gave myself a slight bit of a curve there. Okay, view F, and now I might as well match the shape that's going on here. Okay, just gonna go ahead and you notice that I didn't move this up or down. This is still in line. It's just give me a little bit of a cleaner mesh flow. You'll also notice that I broke the rule of quad. The Alt X here. I no longer have a quad here. Okay, I now have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-sided polygon. I am not going to be turbo smoothing this. I am not going to be sculpting anything on it, subdividing it in any fashion. So it is perfectly fine for me to break quads. I'm not worried about it. If I was worried about it, I would need to split this seg here. Okay, if I hide unselected, I would need to split across here, and I would need to connect these. I'm going to hit J to get rid of this stupid box. Okay, and that would keep me in quads, but I'm not exactly worried about it. I'll show you a nice little trick. In any mode here, or no mode, if you click up here, you can get out of your mode. You can go up to freeform, and there's an optimize tool. Now if I hold over here, if you hold your cursor over there, it gives you a couple of modifiers. None, you can just click edges and collapse them. Shift, you can drag from one vert to the next to target weld, or Control, you can drag between them to connect them. And this is a very handy feature, but it can get you into trouble. I'm just going to hit VP to get my perspective view. So if I just hold Control and drag between those two, it connects it nice. And I do that on the back one too. If I wanted to get back to what I originally was, I just hold Shift and it's a target weld. Okay. So I could basically, if I wanted to, just keep holding Shift and target weld all the way back. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to undo it. But just to show you that you can hold Shift and just target weld everywhere. Okay, it's a very nice feature. You can, and again, you can hold Control and make connections that are hard edged if you want. So The thing is that if I just click anywhere now, it's going to collapse that edge by basically welding the two verts. So it means I'm still stuck on optimize. So optimize is a great tool, but the key is to remember to turn it off. If you don't, it does get you into trouble, and sometimes you won't, you could be right here and you click and you don't notice that maybe something back here got collapsed or something, and that's happened before, where you all of a sudden you turn it around and everything on the other side is all crunched into one vert, and you're like, oh no. That's when you need your 200 undos, because like I said, let me hit J here, if I just I'm going to click and do one stroke all the way back. Now if I undo, one undo, two undos, three undos, it's combining, it's broken it into separate operations, but I did it in one fell swoop. So the obvious thing to do is just click on it to get off of it. The other thing you can do is right click, and that'll get you off of it. I believe escape will not get you off of it. Okay, escape actually gave me a bunch of errors. Okay, so I'm just going to right click or just click on it, and I'm good. And like I said, the cool thing about this is you don't have to be in any subselect, though you can be, and you get the same basic functionality. Okay. So just going to undo until that's done. Right click to get off of that. Okay, so unhide all. Get back to where I'm at. View F, and I'm going to hit Alt X to get back to invisible. Okay. Now I'm going to start cutting in a couple of these. I'm not going to go too far on the LowResMesh, just because it's unnecessary to show the animations or how to animate. So I'm not exactly going to go crazy. I don't need to. I'm just going to do the basic objects. So there's another handy one. Alt X again so I can show you. If I hit 2 and I just pick this one edge, I can now chamfer that edge. Let me move this out of the way. And I can set the amount, how far. It just splits the edge, and I can also set the number of segments. So if I went crazy, I could make a really smooth edge. This would be for like a movie or something, if you really needed it. Okay, but for a game, you want to keep it to pretty much 3 or 4 at the maximum. You don't really want to go too crazy. You don't want to have a million segments. I'll do 4. Actually, I'll do 3. Okay, just hit the checkbox, go back to my front view, Alt X, and now I can go by my verts and just kind of line this up to make a nice curve here that matches. It's a little hard to see my double axis there because of the white background. If I cared about that, I would go and edit the image in Photoshop. Okay, and come here and get these two edges. Oops, I hit 3. I need to hit 2 to get on edges. Connect. Just hit 1. I can move the verts. Careful that you don't just click a vert and try to move it, because it leaves the other one. You need to get all the way through, so I always drag a box around what I'm doing to make sure that I get everything. Okay, just cleaning up a little bit here and there. You can see I have a slight bit of a actual downslope going on here, so I'm just going to match that by the picture. Okay, you can see that that is not perfect straight, it's downsloped slightly. This is very, very basic operations. Now, again, I'm going to chamfer this guy, Alt X so I can see it. I want to try to match this curve in here. Okay, I'm just going to go 2 segments. I'm going way too far, so about right there. Okay, now you can see what this has done is it's left behind some garbage. I hide unselected so I can look at the backside. And this is where this optimize tool comes in pretty handy. Just going to hold shift and I can target weld this stuff together, so I don't need these verts that are there like that. And again, I've broken the quad factor. I would need to split here in order to maintain quads. But like I said, I am not worried about quads because I know that the model will be clean using 3-sided and 4-sided polygons. I am going to avoid anything more than a 4-sided polygon though. So right click, unhide all. Okay, I'm just going to Alt X on it again, hit VF so I can go back to this view, which is my handy modeling view. And I'm going to move that a little forward. That should be down a little bit. Now you see I can potentially break my form, so I'm going to go back to edge when I move that down. And then put that to none. It's a good habit to put that back to none. When I go high res, I'm going to smooth the rest of this stuff out. But for now, on this low res proxy mesh, it's really not that big of a problem to do any of this. Okay, so VP and Alt X, and get out of that. Alright, now what I want to do is I want to make my barrel, then I'm going to make my sights, then I'm going to make my trigger and my mag. And I'm going to leave everything else as it is right now. Obviously this is like a little big planet object. You know, this is just a extruded object. There's no curvature to it at all. So like I said, it's a proxy mesh. This is what I'll provide for anybody who just wants to watch the video and get an idea of what's going on. But for those who donate, along with our appreciation, you will get a perfectly high-res model and high-res textures. So what I want to do is I want to create a cylinder, and nice feature here is the auto grid feature. If you notice, it might be hard to tell, but if you look at my that's connected to my cursor, my actual coordinates here, you can see my Z is now pointing to the right, now Z is pointing to the up. Basically auto grid lets you use the surface of an object as your grid, so it basically lets you draw the object on whatever surface you have going on here. Now it's important to note, for those of you who know what I'm talking about here, let me come out of this, that auto grid takes into account smoothing groups, which can be a pain. I'm going to convert this to editable poly, Control A here, and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on one smoothing group right here, okay, polygon smoothing groups. You can see that it's trying to smooth across the whole thing. Now you'll see that if I go to make a cylinder, you can see how it's curving around because it's trying to follow that smoothing factor of the normal. So if I draw it here, right here, I'm not actually drawing straight up like I would be. I'm drawing out from a corner. It's the same thing here. It's trying to round this by smoothing it, so I end up with something going that way or that way. So if you need to draw something right off of a surface and it's giving you a weird angle and it's not letting you do it, select the object you want to draw off of, get the face that you want to draw off of, and just clear that smoothing group by unchecking a smoothing group. And now when I go to draw it, it's perfectly flat even if I'm right on the edge. Okay, as soon as I get to this one that's still smooth, you can see it curves that. So just keep in mind that it does take smoothing groups into account. It's important to make sure you fight that. So I'm just gonna hit auto smooth and it's definitely gonna be flat. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my cylinder. It's gonna draw it off the front, and I'm gonna draw it backwards, which you can't see that it's happening, but if I go to F3 you can see I drew it through the back. Okay, I'll move it a little more forward. My barrel, for the most part, is not going to be, I don't really need it to go this far back because I can fake it with materials. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it about that long. I don't need any height segments, so I'm just going to drag that down to 1. 18 around is going to give me, if I hit 72 polygons without any edits, and that's actually okay, but if you're really trying to maintain a budget, go 12, okay, you can go 10, 8, 6. If you go 4, you're getting a square. If you go 3, you're getting a triangle, obviously. 5, it's, if this is an RTS, where the objects are tiny and there's millions of them, this is what you want. But if you're doing an FPS, or if you're doing a movie, you'd probably want to go 36, and that gives you a really, really smooth curve here. But for our purposes, we're just going to go 18. Now what we need to do is we need to get this centered here. Now I can obviously just go right-click my Y, but I'm still not centered in the Z here, and I have to eyeball it, which I could be off. I could be here and not notice. I could be here and not notice. So a nice feature is the Align tool. It's up here. Okay. When you pick it, it'll highlight, and then you click the other object you want to align to. Let me cancel that and go into wireframe view just so you can see what's going on. Now there's a hotkey for this. I believe it defaults to Alt-A. Okay. I'm just going to click that, and you can see what's happened is that it has centered it by pivot to pivot. The pivot point of this object is on the front here. The pivot point of this object is centered, so it's centered that way. I can tell this, well, I don't want to do the X position, okay, so it didn't move it in the X, only did it in the Y and the Z. I can say I only want to do the Z, or I only want to do the Y. You can see that Z moves it up and down. You don't have to go pivot to pivot, you can go center to center, okay, X, Y, Z, and now you can see it's more centered. If I go pivot to pivot, it did the pivot point, which is on the tip of this. Center to center is the actual center of the bounding box of this object. Okay, you can also align the orientation. Okay, I turned it to the side, which I don't want, because the orientation is X facing that way, and the orientation of this is probably X facing down that way or something. Okay, you can also do, if you wanted to align something to sit on something, say I only wanted to do the X, I can do maximum to minimum. Okay, that's dead sitting on there. If I move it even the slightest bit, you can see it comes off. If I move it slightest bit the other way, you can see it goes in. Okay, that's a way to get something to sit on something. Let's say I had this here, hit Alt-A, and I only wanted to do the Z position. Okay, I wanted to do the minimum of my object to the maximum of the other one. You can see that is perfectly sitting on the surface. If I hit VF and zoom even way in, these lines will never split because the objects are dead on. Okay, so VP, and I hit Z to zoom out, F3 to go to my outside view. Okay, so I'm going to undo until I get back to where I was. And what I want to do is I want to go in the Y and the Z, and I want to go center to center. And now if you look down the right view, I believe, or let's do the left view so I can see the other side, that's perfectly centered. And I just hit VP, and then I'm going to hit Z. And now I'm going to go to my front view, and I can move it so that it actually lines up with my reference pick. I'm going to hit Alt-X, and you can see that I'm actually a little wider. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop my radius. Okay. And you can see that I don't need to mess with height. I'll just go -15 to keep it nice and even. And I'm going to try 3 and see if that's a good radius. And that's pretty close. So I'm no longer centered in the Z. I'm now matching the picture. I'm just going to put it right there. Hit VP and then Z. Okay, and then Alt-X. I'm going to hit this guy and hit Alt-X, and I'm going to go, oops, VF. Just want to double check. You can see here that I'm actually a little low. Here's another thing. I want to move this, and I want to get this exact, and I want to zoom in nice so I can make sure I hit right on that pixel. But I can't because my gizmo's way over here. What you can do is up here, you can go and pick different coordinate systems, and view is the one we want. Now use pivot point center, okay, which is basically centers it. You can see that it moved over to here. Okay, it's centering my gizmo on my selection. the very last one, if you click and hold this and drag down, we'll say use the transform coordinate center, which is my view. So it's going to use my view center. And now if I move my object, you can see that my transform gizmo, it doesn't actually see, it moves with it, but once I let go by using middle mouse, and now I can zoom in nice, move this up, zoom in a little bit more, move this up, and I can say, okay, I'm dead on that pixel if I really needed it. Okay? So this is a nice one to use. Like I said, lets you look anywhere and still have your gizmo. I'm going to just put that back to the center. Come off of here. Now I can click off this object. Okay. Everything is okay so far. Let's go back to my perspective view. Just hit P. Now what I could do is, let me try to think. Okay, I'm going to convert this to editable poly. Just so anybody knows, I've never modeled a Glock before. This is the first time, so I may have some trials and tribulations, you know, some errors that I do that I'll obviously correct, and it can be a good learning experience to see somebody make mistakes that you may or may not encounter in the future and know what to do about them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this out. The old way of doing this in old 3D, back in the alias days and the Lightwave days, would be to create another copy of this and use a Boolean operation to cut it out, but that's dated. You don't need to do that. You still need it for some things, but for this we don't. All we're going to need to do is hit inset here. Okay, and I can basically, it's almost like a bevel without actually moving it off the surface. So I'm going to go roughly there, hit OK, and I'm going to do my extrude, and I'm going to go in a negative value, and I'll move it to about there. Actually, I'll move it to right outside the surface. Now, you might say, oh, well, you know, what if I want to look down the barrel, you know? If you want to look down the barrel, you will need to cut out this barrel from the slide here, which would be best done with a Boolean operation. Like I said, it's dated for doing certain things, but not for everything. You can't avoid it unless you want to manually try to cut this. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and do that, just to show you how it's done. Basically, you click the object you want to cut from, or it really doesn't matter. It's actually under the Create tab, which is weird, and it's, instead of doing standard primitives, you do these compound objects. So I'm going to create a compound object, and what I want is Boolean. And basically right now, if you look, I'm set on subtract A minus B. So I'm subtracting B from A, and I want A is the object that I have selected, always, okay? Pick operand B, and you can see that it cuts it out. However, it got rid of it. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to right click to get out of Boolean, and I am just going to right click this and say clone a copy before I do that. So now I can take this, which is actually already on Boolean. You can see that it didn't, just because I got out of it, didn't take it out of it. If I wanted to truly cancel this, I have to convert this back to an editable poly, but I don't want to cancel it. I'm just going to pick my operand B, and it got rid of one of those guys, but it kept the other one. Okay, now I can collapse to editable poly by converting, and if I hide this, you can see now I have a barrel cut out nicely. The other thing is I now have a multi-sided, a 22, if you see here, 22-sided polygon, which can actually get me into some trouble. And if I, the other thing I'm going to do really quick is I'm just going to select these two, and I'm going to pick a more wielding color, just something I can see the edges easier, and I usually go with this really dark navy blue. Tends to be a good one. Okay, so now that I can see everything, I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. If I hit 1 here, just want to double check that I didn't get any extra verts. They have vastly improved the Boolean over the course of the generations of Macs. Sometimes before it would leave extra verts that you'd have to clean up manually, but it seemed to do a pretty good job. However, I want to get myself back to triangles, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the optimize tool. I'm just going to hold control and just going to drag these. Let me undo that real quick. You can see it kind of broke what I was doing. Let me try to get that one back there first. Sometimes it can fill in. I'm just going to hit the corners first. And what I could do is let me unhide everything else, or hide everything else, hide unselected. I'm going to end up with a bunch of pretty thin triangles, and what's going to happen is these ones here can get kind of thin, so it might be a wise idea to cut here to make sure that I don't have any really long thin triangles, because long thin triangles tend to give you lighting errors. Now I'm going to basically just connect across these. Okay. Just hit this one and the one back here and connect. You can just drag right there and hit connect. Drag right there and hit connect. And now what if I hit 1, it's given me verts here that I can optimize to avoid those overly long thin triangles, because I can now go to this corner, and if I needed to go further I could split this more. Okay, now I'm showing you how I'm cleaning this up. However, later on this is going to kick me in the butt, but that's okay. I can just show you real quick how to get rid of these. The reason it's going to kick me in the butt is because I want to chamfer these surfaces going around here, because on hide all here you can see I've got curve, I've got smoothness. Now when I go to do my high res model, for my low res this is fine, okay, but when I go to do my high res model, when I go to chamfer these things, if I select these edges around here, you'll see that when I go to do my actual chamfer, those hard edges have given me problems. Okay, if I go a bunch of segments, you can see I've got this really broken stuff I'd have to fix. So I'm just going to cancel that. Basically I can't have these segments here when I go to do that chamfer, and I will get rid of them when I do go to do it, but for now it's fine. I'll do that in a little bit. Okay, now I can move this back, and you can see now that I can move this pretty far back in, and now you can look down the barrel. What we're going to do for the material, technically this barrel in reality goes way back, probably to there or so, based on other guns I've seen. But what happens is if I go back that far, when I go to actually paint and unwrap this, even though yes I can see that far through, this face right here actually is not needed, so I'm going to delete it. I end up with a lot of texture space in here that's really just black solid color, so it doesn't do me any good to go that far back. All I gotta do in reality is go to about right here, and then when I go to map this with the textures, paint this black and also make sure that the specular value there is black, and it will look like a void. It'll never pick up any lighting, no matter what the situation. It will always be solid black, and it'll look like you're looking down the barrel of something really long, especially if I fade a black texture coming out to make it look like this is just in the dark and I'm barely able to see what's going on here. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, now what I want to do is, if I look in my front view here, you can see that it kind of comes out some, and that also I'm a little bit too wide. If I turn, that my actual opening is a little wide here. It pretty much terminates right here. Okay, this distance, and I'm way up here. So let's go back to perspective view. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shrink this. And there's a pretty much like 3 or 4 ways I could do this. I can pick this one edge in here and hit ring, and that gives me this whole entire ring. A ring goes across in parallel. Okay, a loop goes down the length of a segment. So what I wanted was ring, and now I can just make sure that I am centered here. Remember, I use my selection center, and I can shrink that. No problem. Okay, so I'm going to go to my front view. Unfortunately, I can't use the gizmo like this, and I can't do it like, oops, I can't do it in this direction because it didn't do it in that direction. I end up with an oval. So what I need to do is actually be in my front view, hold Alt and my middle mouse, and slightly turn it off so I can see this Z and Y, and then try to get my size there. And that looks close enough. It's anybody who's a stickler for that's gonna be, gonna have to measure it and all that. The other thing, like I said, if I click on this segment here and I go loop, it goes around the length from point to point to point to point. Okay, now I can go to my front view again, and I can move that forward. And you see that I am a little wide, so just eyeballing this, gonna just bring that down a little bit more. And I zoom out, and that's a little bit closer to, I believe, what the actual barrel looks like. No, it's actually pretty much wide. The barrel wall itself is not that thick. So what I'm going to do, oops, go back to max, not UDK. I'm just going to eyeball it. Oh, about there. Now if I wanted to curve this like it is, I can just ring this, hit connect, then move that forward. Okay. Just a little bit more of a curve to it. I'll go ahead and keep that. And I'm going to go ahead and say that the barrel's pretty much done. Now, I'm just going to do the sights next. So I'm going to go to my front view. I'm going to create a box. Come on back to standard primitives, hit a box. I don't want to be on auto grid because I don't want to draw off the side of this thing. Okay. Now the box is not going to be in the right spot, so I'm just going to click anywhere, VP here, and I'm going to Alt A my Y only, center to center. Okay. So now I'm centered that way, and I'm just going to dupe a copy out there, make sure it's a copy. Select them both, and I use my hotkey to convert them into editable poly each. Okay, my hotkey is Control Shift P. Go back to my front view. I'm going to Alt X, and now I can hit 1, and I can match this general size and shape here. Okay, come off of that. Hit 1, Alt X so I can see through it. It looks like it's about there. It's a little wider than that. And that's too high. And it also actually kind of slopes backwards a little bit more. You can also see that it's a little bit of a step straight up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this. I'm going to keep my edge going here just for now. Move that to about that corner. Okay, put that back on none. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these planar in the X, and then move it. Make these planar in the X, and move it. Okay. This is obviously much wider than I need it, so it's about like that. Let's go back and look at the reference pic. Let's see if we can get one. You can see it goes pretty much to the edge. This one's relatively thin. Different models is a Glock 22. This is our Glock 21. But you can see that it comes very close to the actual side edge here, this top corner, so we're going to get closer there. Here. Oop, come out of 1. Okay, we're going to scale it out. Oh, I want to use my center. Scale it out to be just behind full-blown edge, and then it also has a little bit of a curve coming in like that. This guy here, I don't believe has that kind of curve, but hit 1 here. I'm going to do it anyway. So for my video game, it's a little bit of a tighter aiming point, because it's a game. Okay, now this also has a space cut out for it. Let me hit J real quick, get rid of that box. Hit Alt X. So what I want to do is I want to cut a box out of this. And this is another simple way of doing this. Could obviously boolean a box out of it, but then I'd have to align a box and all that stuff, which wouldn't be a big deal, but there's multiple ways to do everything. So I'm just going to connect there. I'm going to go ahead and constrain by edge. Let me change the color of this so it's easier to see. Move that down. I'm going to say, looking at the pick, it's about 2/3 of the way, so let's go about there. And then I'm going to go ahead and select all the way across here, and now I'm going to hit my connect options. And the nice thing is you can actually set the number of segments, and you can pinch it wider or closer together. So I'm going to go about right there. Okay, and here's a very simple way to do this. If I go to try to extrude this, I bring that down some. There's options here for local normal. Okay, so if I bring that in, you can see that it's kind of difficult because it's leaving these edges. So really the quickest and easiest way to do it is just to delete that, select 2 edges, and hit bridge. Okay, just select 2 edges and bridge across. And there, it's cut out perfect. Now if I look down, I can pretty much line up a site. And I'm going to just make it a little tighter. Oops, back on edge again, like I so often do. Make that a little tighter. And there's my site. Very, very basic, very simple, nice and easy. Okay. Now I'm going to do my mag. Okay, zoom out here. Now basically I need a box, so I'm just going to create a box. Don't care about how far it is, just hit View P so I can see. And I'm going to center the pivot again. Okay, it's up here in the hierarchy. Alt A, and I want to go center in the Y. Just going to scale it in because it's not exactly as wide as the rest of the gun. There's a curve going around this thing, but like I said, this is our low res guy. You can see it's slightly separated, so let me hide unselected real quick and convert to editable poly. Grab this top face, gonna inset it a hair, a little bit more than that, like that, and then I'm gonna extrude it up. Just hit the checkbox, Alt X. I'm gonna unhide all. Go back to my side view. I'm gonna take this guy and hit Alt X so I can see what I'm doing, and now I'm gonna kind of match that angle like that. Try to get these parallels close as I can. Okay, now that mag's going up in there. Alright, let's do the trigger. Same thing. Just make a box. Don't matter where it is, just Alt A. Hit OK, VP. I don't think that went in the right axis, which it didn't. Okay. Go to my side view. It's centered now. Alt-X on that so I can see through it. Okay, now I'm going to give myself Control 1, or Control Shift P and then 1. Get my points here. I'm going to scale those in, move them to that point. I'm now going to move these to just inside my model here, just over that line, and just back to here. You can see that the trigger actually might be a little hard to tell, but it's starting to curve back. I don't know this shape that's going on back here, but I know what's visible is there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and connect, scale it in a little bit. And just start moving it into place. Do a couple connections here to keep that curve. When I go to do this high res, I'll cut this more. That's about there. There's a little dip coming out of the back of that. Okay, the other thing to note about a Glock is that it has a safety trigger. Also, this is way wide, so trigger's about that wide or so. Just guessing. Could be a little thick, could be a little thin. I know it's not like that, but it could be, I'd imagine something like that. Actually, it's going to be a little wider. The safety trigger is an extra button that is pivoted right here. You need to press this against the trigger in order for the gun to fire. That way, it's just kind of a secondary safety. The gun has safeties. I don't know if that's it or not, or where the safety is on a Glock, but I do know it has a trigger safety. A lot of guns have that these days, secondary thing, so that if the gun gets dropped on its side, it will not go off. However, it'll go off if you drop it on like a nail or something and it hits that. So no gun is safe, no matter what, unless it's completely 100% taken apart and unloaded. So practice gun safety. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing I did with the sight, really. I'll just go ahead and get all the way up. Okay, I'm going to hide unselected just so everything's out of my way. And I'm going to hit Alt-X so I can see what's going on easier. And I'm going to connect this. Important to note that last time when I did the connect, I set it to 2 segments. If you just hit connect again, let me show you here. If I hit OK and then I undo that, and if I just hit connect again, it stayed on 2 segments. It's important to remember that sometimes you can't just hit connect because it remembers whatever your last settings were. Now, fortunately, I want it to be 2 segments. However, it can still be an issue if you don't go back here and reset that back to 1 segment, which I'm not worried about yet. And again, I still think that the easiest, quickest way is just to delete these. Well, there is another trick you can do. The bridge tool, if you have 2 edges selected and hit bridge, it bridges it and takes you out of bridge mode. However, if you don't have anything selected and you highlight it, it puts you in bridge mode, and you can click and it will draw a box and you can basically just keep bridging. Or, careful, even though I went to border mode, it kept me in bridge mode. A border is like a whole string of open edges. Now you gotta watch for that. So what I can do is I can select this border and I can hit cap. I can select this border and hit cap. In order for me to do that, I had to bridge here, because if I didn't, and I picked this whole border and I went to do cap, it would cap it and it wouldn't really know where to go. You can see that it just crisscrossed because it's got a curve here. It doesn't know to connect perfect around here. It's still a stupid computer and we are the thinking machine ourselves. So you have to help it by breaking that curve by just bridging across, and then you can do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the bridge mode manually, because the cap is okay. However, you can see that it did not bridge my edges like I did manually, so I would have to go back to optimize hole control and manually do those edges. So that's why I chose to do the manual bridge.